This is the Capitol Rundown.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
I know there's a lot of fear and anger and uncertainty right now about people in power who frankly have no business being there.
Not because they committed a high crime or misdemeanor, but simply because they ruled against Trump.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Sherry Jones. A lot is happening in Michigan politics, so let's get you caught up. We're beginning in Washington, where on Monday, people gathered to rally for equality on International Transgender Day of Visibility. This comes after a wave of orders signed by President Donald Trump meant to erase transgender people from government records and perhaps history. The rally was organized by the Christopher Street Project. That's a trans right advocacy group, which takes its name from the street where the 1969 Stonewall riots took place, considered the birthplace of the gay rights movement here in the U.S.
And in the face of this massive threat to all of our rights, in the face of what Trump and his billionaire cronies are unleashing, we demand more from the people we elected to protect us. We deserve more. And we say, with all of the power that we have, cowards have no place in Congress.
Now, during last year's presidential campaign, candidate Trump used fear around transgender people's access to sports and bathrooms to fire up conservative voters. Back in office, President Trump is pushing the issue even further, erasing mention of transgender people on government websites and passports and trying to remove them from the military.
Trans people are people first. Their identity and sexual orientation has never and will never make them any lesser, no matter what any president or billionaire wants to say.
They want Americans to believe that our LGBTQ neighbors are to blame for the challenges we face as a country. They hope that if we're focused on all of us, we won't notice that the Republicans are closing our public schools, that they're defunding Social Security, slashing our health care, firing veterans, increasing costs of housing and groceries, and starting trade wars with our allies.
Since 2020, about half of the states passed laws barring transgender people from sports competitions, aligning with their gender, and have banned or even restricted gender-affirming medical care for minors. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and other major medical groups have said that gender-affirming treatments can be medically necessary and are supported by evidence. Here in Michigan, state Republicans have introduced bills restricting transgender rights, saying it's for the protection of both girls and women. Now, for example, House Bill 4024 would restrict public school students from using the bathrooms and changing rooms that match their biological sex, regardless of their gender identity. The bill language says this is to ensure the privacy from students of the opposite sex. And that was introduced by State Representative Joseph Fox of Caledonia back in January and was referred to the House Committee on Education and Workforce. But last year, when Democrats controlled both chambers, they added gender identity as a protected class under Michigan's Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. Well, up next, the first Democrat hoping to follow U.S. Senator Gary Peters on Capitol Hill just announced her run. Plus, state Democrats are showing a divide on how to respond to the Trump administration. We'll have that and a lot more when we come back. Welcome back. As President Donald Trump's remaking of the federal government continues, there are disagreements in the Democratic Party on when to stick to bipartisanship and when to stand firm. Our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic has a report on the situation here in Michigan.
President Donald Trump is running the Republican Party, but some moderate Republicans are not too happy with that, and there is a deep divide. But it turns out the GOP is not the only major party with major internal disagreements over Mr. Trump. This Democratic dispute involves Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Democratic State Attorney General Dana Nessel. She says this about him: he wants to be a king.
Thinks nothing of shredding the Constitution or undermining the law. Thinks nothing of disparaging Americans. has really, I would say, almost set our flag ablaze on the global stage. I mean, how do you negotiate with somebody who fancies himself to be a king and not a president?
Governor Whitmer, on the other hand, has not engaged in that brand of anti-Trump rhetoric. She is more pragmatic. Last December, she was asked if she had the opportunity to tell him directly to his face, would she say this?
Let's lay the foundation between you and I of a good working relationship. You're smiling. Am I onto something here?
Oh no, absolutely. That is how I feel.
The governor concedes she and the new president won't always agree, but the voters have spoken.
The people of Michigan and the people of this country have elected Donald Trump as the next president. My job is to work with them.
The Attorney General, who wants to fight, not talk, never mentions the governor by name in her remarks, but she does warn folks like the governor during this Michigan Public Radio interview to, well, listen up.
So I just don't know how you look at a President Trump the same way you would, a President Bush or Reagan. I think that those Democrats will look back on this very difficult and concerning time in American history and have deep regrets that they didn't do more to fight back when they still had the opportunity to do so.
The governor has met in the Oval Office with the president, had dinner with him at the White House, and is trying to cooperate. Ms. Nessel, on the other hand, couldn't disagree more.
Thank you, Tim. State Senator Mallory McMorrow on Wednesday announced her run for the U.S. Senate seat that will be left open when Senator Gary Peters leaves office. The Royal Oak Democrat is the first one from her party to jump into the race. And as part of her announcement, Senator McMorrow released a campaign video. In it, she touts her progressive record in Lansing and calls out the Trump administration as would be expected. But she also has some harsh words for her own party.
I know there's a lot of fear and anger and uncertainty right now about people in power who frankly have no business being there. So you know what won't fix it? The same old crap out of Washington.
In an interview with the Associated Press, Senator McMorrow said the Democratic Party lacks a plan for the future, and she's been critical of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's leadership. Well, still to come, President Trump's latest round of tariffs just went into effect. And our Capitol correspondent will be here to talk about that race for the Senate and a whole lot more coming up next. Well, welcome back. As we just talked about, State Senator Mallory McMorrow is hoping to become U.S. Senator Mallory McMorrow. Our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic talked to the Rundown's Megan Vaselli about who else might jump into the race.
It's time for an update on Michigan politics, and who better to tell us than our very own Tim Skubic. Tim, we just saw the report on State Senator Mallory McMorrow being the latest person and first Democrat to announce a bid for Michigan's soon-to-be open U.S. Senate seat. What does she bring to the race, and who do you think will jump in next?
Well, we're off. Okay, now this race really begins. It's actually started earlier this year when Gary Peters, the current U.S. Senator from Michigan, announced that he would not run for re-election. And when a long-sitting senator says, I'm leaving, everybody and his uncle who ever wanted to serve in the U.S. Senate says, aha, here's my chance. So the first one in the water is State Senator Mallory McMorrow. She's a Democrat from Oakland County, a relative newcomer to the Michigan political process. In fact, she has only run for office once, and that was in 2018. And she pulled off an upset victory over an incumbent state senator who was Republican from Oakland County. She has gained national exposure. She was a speaker, if you will, at the Democratic National Convention, which is a pretty good get. And now she's the first one to announce that she would like to be a U.S. senator and drop the state senator title. Here's her problem. She's not going to be alone. Everybody else is taking a look at this thing, and there are other Democratic players who, if they get in the pool with her, could change the dynamics. Right now, by definition, she's the front runner because there's nobody else running. But if Dana Nessel gets in, pollster Steve Mitchell says she would automatically be the front runner. Why? Because she's run for statewide office twice and been very successful at that, and the U.S. Senate race is a statewide race. Other names that are out there, two congresswomen, one from Oakland County, Congresswoman Stevens, and one from the Saginaw County area, Congresswoman McDonald. And then you have Abdul El Sayed, who ran unsuccessfully for governor against Gretchen Whitmer, and now he is seriously looking at this race as well. So the Democrat field will be crowded. If Nessel gets in, she'll be the front runner because of her status of winning those statewide races. But don't count Ms. McMorrow out because she has a lot of money. She's got some national name ID, and she will be competitive, as we say in the biz. So the race is on, and all of this doesn't come to fruition until November of 2026.
All right, Tim, thanks for your perspective as always. Well, coming up next on The Rundown, Republicans in Congress are talking about limiting the powers of federal courts. But first, Donald Trump calls it Liberation Day, but others are calling it a tax on American consumers. We'll have the details on that and much more when we come back. Welcome back. President Trump is rolling out new tariffs on trading partners. The White House is calling it Liberation Day. Our Washington correspondent Maddie Biertemple reports on the announcement and concerns of an escalating trade war.
The White House says these tariffs will work to level the playing field for American workers, but lawmakers who are wary of the move, including a few Republicans, say they're concerned they'll lead to higher prices.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
President Trump is imposing what he calls reciprocal tariffs, meaning the U.S. will match the tax rate of other countries, or in some cases...
So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less, so how can anybody be upset?
Most Republicans say they support the tariffs. Kansas Congressman Tracy Mann says he doesn't expect to see agriculture in his state take a hit.
Farmers I talked to in Kansas are excited to see President Trump actually doing something about this.
But some Republicans aren't on board.
The people who are for tariffs are just wrong.
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul says tariffs will get passed on to Americans when companies start raising prices.
They will hurt us, and there's a threat of them not only tanking the stock market, but there's a threat of them leading to a recession.
The president says the move will bring jobs to America, make trade more fair, and in the long run, make life more affordable. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer doesn't buy that.
Prices will rise on virtually every kind of product.
And allies abroad, like British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, are against the tariffs.
A trade war is in nobody's interest.
Some trading partners like Canada and the EU have already planned their own tariffs in retaliation. A White House advisor estimates the new tariffs will raise $600 billion annually, but Democrats warn it will cost American families thousands of dollars a year. In Washington, I'm Maddie Biertemple.
Republicans in Congress are moving ahead with their push to limit the power of judges who issue rulings against the Trump administration. GOP lawmakers say one judge should not have enough power to derail President Trump's policies. But Democrats argue no other president has tried to test the courts this much so quickly into a new administration. California Congressman Darrell Issa's bill aims to limit the ability of the lower court judges to issue temporary blocks on policies with nationwide implications. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt weighed in on Tuesday on a judge's recent ruling against one deportation case.
Are you saying that it is okay to ignore a judge's ruling if you don't like it?
Who does that judge work for?
He's an immigration
It was
judge.
an immigration judge who works for the Department of Justice at the direction of the Attorney General of the United States.
Democrats on the Hill oppose Congressman Issa's legislation and stress Republicans appointed many of the judges who are now in question.
These judges from across the political spectrum are showing up to work, and they're showing America why we have an independent judiciary.
MAGA Republicans in Congress have called for judges to be impeached, not because they committed a high crime or misdemeanor, but simply because they ruled against Trump.
Now, on the Senate side, Republicans are working on similar legislation and held a hearing on Wednesday. Well, coming up next, a new record was set this week on the floor of the United States Senate. We'll tell you how long New Jersey Democrat Cory Booker spoke on the Senate floor, shattering a past record in more ways than one. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Democratic Senator Cory Booker broke the record for the longest floor speech in recorded Senate history. Here's Matt Brown with the details.
Right now, we're in the U.S. Capitol, where Cory Booker just made history for breaking the longest Senate speech in the chamber's history. But that's not the only reason why his speech was historic. Booker broke the record of Senator Strom Thurmond, who was an avowed segregationist who filibustered for more than 24 hours the passage of the 1957 Civil Rights Act. Booker is a proud black progressive who advocated for a much more conciliatory and inclusive politics in his more than 25 hours of speaking in opposition to the Trump administration's many early policy actions.
Whether you're a Republican or a Democratic president, you don't insinuate fear amongst vulnerable communities.
Booker did not leave the Senate floor for more than 25 hours while he gave the speech, and was only allowed to stop talking while he fielded questions from his Democratic colleagues, though he made a very clear point to say that he was not ceding the floor while he listened throughout the 25-hour marathon. To prepare for the speech, Booker abstained from eating over the weekend and denied drinking of most water so that he could prepare to go through what many are now calling an act of political stamina. So what did Booker talk about? Well, his staff assembled literally hours of copy for him to be able to read on the Senate floor at any time. But more importantly, Booker spoke about the testimonies of Americans who'd experienced cuts to their jobs or federal programs that they rely on in the early actions of the Trump administration. He also spoke about the constitutionality of the fights that the Trump administration is having with the courts at the moment, as well as a broader moral argument for what Americans owe each other in this time of historic change. It really struck a chord with Democratic voters who were very energized after seeing Booker's spirited and impassioned speech. Many Democratic voters are now pointing to other Democratic lawmakers and saying that they need to be emulating Booker, maybe not in the stamina, but in the energy and the passion that he was showing as a path forward for the party.
And that's our show for this week. As always, thank you for watching the Capitol Rundown.